tip.
Good afternoon. It is July 1st, 2024. You're listening to a Little Column A, Little Column B, hosted by Will Levinos and co-hosted by Zach Bishop. How are you doing today, buddy?
What is going on, Will? It is now July 2024, and this is just a nice reminder to everybody that the Boston Celtics are your world champions. There is a lot of off-season stuff that is happening. I think we're going to go through and find out, hey, who is winning the offseason? This just really reminds me of the Patriots in their heyday, where we'd win the Super Bowl, and then teams would get all excited about what moves they made or what draft picks they got, and then we were ready to go. And I think that we are in prime position to continue to not win the offseason, but to win the actual championship that matters. But in the past week, between the draft and free agency and trades, the East, they mean business. There are some teams that are coming after us. They are making bold moves, and I'm excited about it.
It's been a busy NBA season that feels like it almost didn't end. It's like the Celtics won, we did the parade, rolled right into a draft, of which last week we talked about how there really wasn't a chalk, there wasn't a standard of anything, and then we had a whole bunch of kind of weird free agents. Not a real desirable selection, but like some odd pieces that if they went certain places I think would impact more than normal years. But just one thing after another, I think you have to open with what the New York Knicks have done. Just move after move over the last couple of years, making trade after trade and now signing after signing. They go all in. They go all in on Mikal Bridges, giving up so many picks, giving up Bogdan Bogdanovic, and going all in, re-signing OG Anunoby. Hopefully Randall's back. I assume they're keeping Mitchell Robinson. Looks like they're going to lose Isaiah Hartenstein. But I think this is the biggest move that's happened over the offseason right now. We're looking at a lineup that's going to be Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, I assume Julius Randle, OG Anunoby, and Mitchell Robinson with Josh Hart and Dante Vincenzo off the bench. This feels like a team that is trying to match up with the Celtics and is replicating a possible formula that they have, but I think they also have the same weaknesses that we have, and perhaps they're going to fall into the trap that Minnesota did last year, where they essentially went all in on developing a roster that is perfectly capable of beating Denver and successfully beat Denver, but really wasn't that great against anyone else. I don't know, you're obviously the Boston homer who's opened up with the Boston championship for the last 4 podcasts. I don't know how many more that's going to go on. How worried are you about the New York Knicks?
I would say medium worried. They talk about wounded warriors down the stretch. It was just every series they went into, they were losing somebody else. But the same way when we got Porzingis last year, said if he's healthy, is he going to stay healthy? And that was kind of a mixed bag in the playoffs. I guess also during the regular season, but the playoffs when it matters. And now that they don't have Hartenstein, having Mitchell Robinson, I'm going to put him in that kind of Porzingis slot. That is he going to be healthy? So that's a concern. I think they're really just diving all the way in on this Villanova Knicks situation. It has to be very bizarre if you are a Sixers fan that is also probably a Villanova fan. If you're in that area, and now the Knicks just have all of your guys from your college championship team. That just has to be weird as you're hoping to compete with them. But this is a lot. There's a lot to give up. You read it out. It's a lot of unprotected picks, and I think that Mikal Bridges is an excellent player. I think you mentioned trying to compete specifically with the Celtics. He's a guy that can play defense and that can shoot, and that's really helpful. But this is a guy that has made one all-defensive team, and that was a couple years ago. No all-star teams, and now you absolutely backed up the truck of assets, and we're seeing this. We'll get into this later on. Paul George is now not with the Clippers anymore, and there are still unprotected picks that will be going to OKC. So I think the Knicks, they got to take a swing. They really like this team. They didn't really have to give up anybody. For sure, Boyan, but it wasn't like he was there for a while. But I think adding in Mikal, like they're gonna be legit. I don't think that this pushes them past the Celtics, but I think it definitely shrinks the margin that we have. Especially you're still gonna have Tibbs that's gonna be running them crazy. Saw the thing a couple days later how Mikal hasn't missed a game since high school, and so it's like, oh man, Tibbs and a guy that doesn't miss games, that's just a match made in heaven there.
Yeah, having the Cal Ripken kind of record going for that long is really impressive for the NBA, especially the last couple seasons not really being on a relevant team. And I'm not saying he took nights off, but it certainly would have probably been nice to, because that was not the fun lineup to be with last year. He's with all of his college buddies again. I think it's a good fit. I actually think on most nights he's going to be their second best player. I think there's a versatility with him that is going to help unlock a lot of things and make life easier for everyone else. But all of that hinges on being healthy. I also think giving up all these picks, if anyone's worried about having picks, I think they could trade any one of these assets and get back more picks. But I don't see how those picks are going to help these guys tomorrow. This trade helps them today, tomorrow, and the future going forward. They're able to pay Jalen Brunson and Mikal Bridges for the same salary as Bradley Beal and Phoenix. What a win for that is. I don't care how many picks you need to give up. When you put those together, it's worth it. This might not have been worth it for every other team if they gave up these sort of picks, but for this team, for the fit that it is, there's a confidence level with it. I don't think it's as risky of a fit. Like, what are we worried about? Do we really think he's not going to fit in here? Like, is there any scenario with that?
Obviously they have they have the history of playing together in college. It's not a ton, in NBA standards, but I have to imagine that he's going to fit in. It's going to fit in fine. It's just a matter of it was a lot to give up, and missing out on Hartenstein, and just a lot of these guys coming off of injuries. I mean, even Brunson, broke his hand at the very end of the season, so that impacts you to at least some degree. So it's just a matter of when these guys are coming in for training camp and to start the year, are they starting with a full fresh team, or are they starting with some of the guys, and maybe you aren't off to the fastest start, and the New York media isn't exactly the nicest or most understanding.
I think the actual scenario that is more likely to happen, that everyone has accused Boston of getting lucky, of not having to face a whole bunch of stars, but more specifically, not having to face a lot of big guys. We dodged Giannis. We dodged Embiid. We dodged Jokic. We dodged Minnesota's Twin Towers. There's a lot of scenarios, though, where the Knicks or us will have to collide with one of them, and I'm not saying we aren't capable of beating them, but I think that's a monster we just didn't have to deal with last year, and neither of the rosters really have an answer to that. We don't have Grant Williams anymore. We haven't faced Giannis since, and I like Drew. I'm sure he can unsolve some certain things, but I think there's been enough bad-mouthing of Giannis that there's going to be an extra fire next year that I'm not even sure what that looks like for a guy that comes every game 110%. Is there any scenario where those guys are healthy and that they're just as screwed as us?
I don't think that Giannis is the issue. I think it's all the guys around Giannis, and if that is the level that Dame that's as high as he can go is what we saw last year. Middleton's just he's getting older and older, and even though he always puts it on a performance against us, it's just I think that team around them is going to be more difficult, and we've had our ups and downs going against Giannis, where he's gotten us and we've gotten him. So I think we shouldn't just forget about him, but I think it's just going to be one of those. He can be at this other level, but if the team around him just can't support it, it's not going to work. As well as, I mean, I hope it doesn't happen again, but Giannis is starting to get into that injured all the time. And is it okay? He's this certain height, and just guys at this, almost like Porzingis. You got these guys that are so big that just keeping them healthy is a struggle.
Like OG Anunoby, or like Mitchell Robinson, or like Julius Randle.
Some of those. I think Mitchell Robinson has been kind of continuous. I'm not so sure on on the Randall piece of it. Some of the other guys, because you're not injury prone until you are, and kind of vice versa. So there's different injuries that seem to be recurring and other stuff. Embiid has had his injury problems, but I think there's a good chunk of those that
I think there's some
are
excusable
just
injuries.
unlucky,
Yeah.
and just unlucky. It's not like, oh yeah, pulled hamstring, soft tissue. Yeah, yeah. Again, that comes up. It's like, well, he broke his face one year. Just like I'm willing to give him a little more of the benefit of the doubt than with some of the other guys.
I think he's also played injured a lot, and you gotta. I don't know if you want to encourage that for one, and I also don't know if that's something that's always complimentary. It's like this guy's always hurt, but he plays hurt. It's like, well, does he ever play healthy? It's like nobody plays. It's like,
Yeah.
what do we want here? Like, I want you to be healthy, but I also need you to play. And then there's, like Porzingis playing in the finals. Like that was wild. I still can't even believe that happened. That wasn't worth it. That didn't work. But if a guy wants to play and he's willing to risk it, I guess we could do it. It's like I still could see a scenario though where he's out even longer than he is. All right.
You didn't think that, or maybe I don't know why you didn't think the Knicks were going to be good enough, but I'm pretty confident that the Knicks will be in attendance next year when we are getting our rings. I think this move, it puts them as the upcoming contender, and so I think that NBA always wants to kick off the season with a bang, and I think they're going to want that matchup as the early matchup.
All right, so do we like the Bridges trade? Do we like the moves that the Knicks have made? If you were a Knicks fan, which you're not, would you be happy with these moves?
I think yes. I think you've done the, hey, we're really close. You've done they've actually acquired some more draft capital, so they even have more that they could use. So it's not like in the past where they get a guy that's past his prime. Mikal is in his prime, like you mentioned with the salaries. They can get a couple of runs in here, and they really like that team from last year. So keeping basically the team from last year and then adding a weapon, I have to imagine that they're thrilled with what happened.
I think not only is the roster thrilled, but I also think this is for the first time an actual Thibodeau roster that he can just click with. I think even in Chicago, the years that it did work were a couple in between, and guys were just in really good shape. But for the most part, I think it's a lot of forcing guys to do Thibs' way, and he's not always as easy to do that. I think all of these guys are kind of already like, no, we like to play this way. We like to play a lot of minutes. We like to play hard. And I think that's going to be really, really effective. I think this is the strongest roster he's ever had, especially to his strengths. And that's a little fearful. But, he's I guess his championship is an assistant with Boston, and that's really it for playoff success, right? I mean, last year was incredible, but it wasn't like him. It was a deteriorating roster of some bad luck, some kind of predictable.
I mean, that's what I said coming into it, is that he's got a history of this. Of he pushes the main guys during the regular season, and then when it comes to the playoffs, when everyone else then goes and says, okay, we're going to that next gear, his teams don't have that next gear.
We'll see. All right, other than a Knicks trade and a whole lot of fandom phenomenon just happening all in front of all of our faces after the parade, they're just doing everything they can. There was an NBA draft. We did our best to really prep for this, and I don't want to go down and break down a whole lot because I don't think that we really know a whole lot about any of the players, to be honest with you, but I figured we would just go back and forth and talk about a couple takeaways, things that caught our attention, things that are maybe head-scratching, things that we didn't like, things that we did like. You want to go first? What was your top takeaway from the NBA draft?
Sure. My first takeaway is France is taking over. Wemby, overall number one last year. That was a no-brainer. And then this year, first two are from France, 3 of the top 6, and then a total of 4 in the first round. And I wonder how much of it is Wembanyama coming last year and having all the hype. And so was there just more eyeballs on the French teams? Or is this just something like this has been coming for a while? Everybody that was on the international scene knew it. But do you think that there's going to be a wave of French talent that's going to continue, or is this just a blip on the radar?
I think it reflects more of the college talent not being what you want it to be, and in years that college talent is, I think this is a little bit more of a debate, and that the reach for these foreign guys is harder to make. I think you just have a little bit more evidence, but I think you have more evidence of some international guys being really successful of recent also. I mean, Luka playing professional ball and dropping to where he dropped is it should be a crime at this point based on the player he's become. So I think some teams are scared to do that and they just hope that it turns out well. I don't know if it's as much Wembanyama as it is finding Giannis late in the round, finding Luka late in the round, finding Jokic in the second round. I think some teams are just scared to pass up on that versus it seems like there's always another college guy. Just you could kind of find these guys. I think there's a lot more of a type for the college guys, and that's maybe there's something interesting about the foreign part of not knowing as much or knowing that at least they've played against professional talent. I just think that's a year where there was a weak college class, and that like next year, I don't know if you're going to be hearing a lot of French names, or at least if you are, they're going to be falling late.
Yeah, I think you are correct that this past year was a weaker draft or a weaker class at the college level. I got the 23 top basketball recruits coming up and just going through the first five. Number one was Ron Holland. He went. I think he was in the G League. He didn't actually go to college. He was in the mix. Isaiah Collier. He went to USC. He got drafted at 29. Justin Edwards, he went to Kentucky. He started all the games where Reed didn't start the games, and he got drafted at 3. Justin Edwards didn't even get drafted. Cody Williams went to Colorado. He got drafted, and then Aaron Bradshaw at Kentucky, and that one really didn't work out as well. So I think next year there's going to be more guys specifically at the top.
Well, actually, we'll just get one of my takeaways out here. I wrote down that Utah and Danny Ainge wins again, taking Cody Williams, as you mentioned, at 10, and Isaiah Collier from USC at 29. I just thought that was good value. I think those are good chances, especially for the team in the situation that they're in and sort of this middle rebuild, and they have a variety of directions they can go. I mean, they can get aggressive at any point. Nobody knows what's going to happen to Lauri Markkanen and his future, but overall, since Danny's been there, I feel like this team has gotten better and drafted well and becomes a little bit more fearful of every day. And I think this is adding these two players in a draft that's not super sexy. I think these were smart picks. And I thought Utah had a really good day. And I don't know if I could have said that about every other team. So that's one of my takeaways. What do you got for something else?
Just one of my concerns there, and it's not necessarily specific on Williams, but the Colorado had definitely three. I think 3 guys drafted. It might have been one was in the second round, and they were only a 10 seed. So, I mean, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that's not going to translate, but just like a little bit of a red flag there. But I guess that's kind of part of this whole draft is that there were no good options, really. So my next takeaway is that none of the top 7 picks will have a serious impact on a serious team this upcoming year.
None of them.
So I don't think Risa Shea, I don't think he's going to have a real impact on the Hawks. Wizards aren't going to be a real team. I don't think that Reed is going to be like a main contributor on Houston if they make a jump. I don't think that Castle is going to be a main guy for the Spurs. Same with the Pistons aren't going to be good. Hornets aren't going to be good. Portland isn't going to be good.
All right, yeah, you're right, and I have one of my takeaways is Minnesota taking Dillingham at 8, which I think is the first real player that I think will have an impact next year. So maybe that is true. I didn't group that together. That's a good podcast bit right there. But Minnesota trading with San Antonio, who's choosing not to take Dillingham at 8, and who earlier took Castle and later signed CP3. I don't know what San Antonio was waiting for. I'm not sure why Dillingham didn't feel like the guy. I don't know if they didn't, like you said, I don't know if Castle's going to make the rotation, and they felt like, well, if Castle's not going to get in, Dillingham's not going to get in. Why do we need 2 guys who aren't going to make the rotation? But I thought for Minnesota to jump in and really go after a guard that I like the possibility and the potential of it. I don't think Dillingham was the best Kentucky guard available. I agree with Reed possibly having some trouble in Houston. I think Houston's really good. That he's it's not even going to reflect how good he is. It's just more he's going to have some real competition of just trying to break the rotation over there. I don't think Ime is just going to give in to him. I do like the fit, though. I do think that's where he should have went. I would have taken him at 3. But if you're the Spurs, why did you trade Dillingham to Minnesota? Like why didn't you want that?
It's not even so much the trade portion of it is what they got back in return. It was a 2031 unprotected first round pick and a 2030 top 1 protected pick swap from the Timberwolves. So basically, it's like a 2031 unprotected pick. So maybe they were thinking, well, we gotta wait until Anthony Edwards is older and maybe he's moved on, and just like this iteration. And you're thinking by that time it's not going to be as good. But I'm just wondering, do you have to worry about the same thing with Wembanyama? This is 7 years in the future. This is a good chunk away, and I'm just thinking you need guys. And maybe they looked at the draft and said, after Castle, really no one from this draft is really gonna make a noticeable difference. So we gotta move on. But just it seems like you're punting too far away. You want to make sure that Wemby is like ready to go and has the guys around him as soon as possible.
I know Tim Duncan stayed, Manu stayed, Tony Parker stayed, but Kawhi left, and to just lock in Wemby for so long, knowing he is talk about player empowerment. Is anyone going to have more power than him over the next 5 years? Like I just think if you're the Spurs, to be so patient about everything was okay last year. It was a little weird. It was a lot of rough rebuilding with guys, just forcing guys to be in positions they're not comfortable in, and really just like you said, punting on a year. I don't know how many more years you could do this. Like I think after this year, and maybe the Chris Paul signing fixes some of it, but I do you think Chris Paul should be starting on this team? Like how many minutes do you think Chris Paul should be playing for the Spurs?
I think maybe his injuries will make that easier. Yeah, actually, I didn't even think about that, but I think he starts.
I think if you have Dillingham
25 minutes
and Castle there and Chris Paul and they have Trey Jones, I understand why you didn't want to have all of that. I think I would have rather have Dillingham than signing Chris Paul at this point in his career. I'd rather have Chris Paul in a suit on the sideline coaching than suiting up at this point. I think we're there. Like the contract was brutal, and I actually like that they only signed him 1 year for 12 after getting waived by the Warriors. But there's a real reason like no one else wanted him, let alone trade for him over the last couple of years. And then we're just throwing him to Wemby, being like, well, really good veteran here. It's like, well, maybe this young guy actually wants to win. He doesn't want to be coached. He's good now. He's ready to roll. I would have taken Dillingham if I was San Antonio. But
it just seems like you try to get as many young guys as you can, and try to get them to work, and just as many bites at the apple, as possible, and cost controlled on the same timeline. That just I was surprised when I saw that trade, and especially for where it was to and what it was for.
Wemby's going to hide so many weaknesses of other players of just being an aide as a teammate. I'd rather him be hiding Dillingham's bad defense than CP3's bad defense. Because that's just there's a difference there. There's someone's capable of it, and the other one's just not thinking correctly. Like we could teach the guy to think he's capable of running and actually guarding a back door. There's a dead end with Chris Paul. Do you think they're gonna make the playoffs this year?
No, but they're not gonna tank this year.
All right. Takeaway, you're up. Are you only 2, right? You're good.
I have more.
All right, what else you got? Mine aren't. I'll be honest. Going forward, these aren't very happy ones. So, if you have a more positive one,
okay, I have a positive one because my second one was kind of negative. Zach Edey and John Morant, they're gonna play awesome together. I know that the joke is that John Morant can make it up and down the court 3 times before Edey can make it up once. I do not think that that's the case. Obviously, John Morant is way faster, but I think that they're going to be able to run the pick and roll, and as long as you keep it simple for Edey to start, and if Ja can get back to the pre-injury levels, I think that is going to be it's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
I hope so. Are you a little concerned that Edie dropped out of Team Canada? He's going to prep for the NBA instead. I was kind of hoping to see him just, I don't know, go bang a body against Wembanyama and the Towers in France, or maybe even going against us to just see, if he's going to benefit in any sort of style of play, it's this international league is the only one where they kind of still play with a guy like him and on these other teams. And him, I understand getting ready, and he might not even broken the rotation. Canada's got a really good roster. I just wanted to see it though. I really just feel like that might be something we see in the next couple of years, or maybe he doesn't have the best NBA career, but Team Canada, 4 years from now, maybe Edie's just crushing it out there. Who knows? But are you worried about that at all?
I think he must have gotten word from management that said, "Hey, even if you make the team, you're not going to play. Like you're not going to get a chance." And I think he looked at it and said, "Okay, like what are my best options here?" Because I would think the way you get better at basketball is playing basketball at the highest level, and that would be the Canadian Olympics team over the summer league team. So that's the only thing that makes sense to me is that he was told you're not gonna get to play. You're not gonna really be in the mix. Maybe he was told straight up, you're not gonna make this team. They got a lot of guys, and so he said, okay, let me, or gave him the option, let me bow out. So then the headline isn't Edie cut from national team.
I already see the headline when they lose and they get bodied by somebody huge, being like, I don't know why they didn't have Edie. It's like if we have a homegrown guy, he's right here. He's fresh out of college, doesn't have any major injuries yet. Like, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but he's a big guy. The older he gets, the more concerned you can certainly have at that. I think right now, it's as fresh as he's going to be. All right, other takeaways. Like I have these last ones aren't great. We could kind of go through quick of this. Portland over the last couple of years has now traded for DeAndre Ayton, traded for Rob Williams, and then drafted Donovan Clingan at 7. I understand being committed to the guards that you have and not really wanting to replace them, but there are other needs on this team than just finding a big man. And to think you have 3 cracks at it, and now all 3 of these guys are somehow ever going to find playing time together, which just doesn't seem possible.
Maybe they're just going to have a lineup of all centers, and they don't even worry about dribbling. They're really tall, and they just hold the ball over all these tiny other guys on the other team, and they just pass it around, and they're just way bigger. Maybe that'll work.
My biggest problem is that they're not very versatile big men. Like you can have, kind of a skinnier guy that can maybe shoot. You could have like a big monster rebounder. You could have an undersized guy that's maybe better at switching low. Like there's 3 guys that are just have very obvious the same weaknesses, I think, on certain pick and rolls, and don't really have a great offensive game outside of a lob. And I'm not even sure, like they're all better at different things. Like I think Ayton's the better shooter.
Ayton's gone, right?
It has to be, but who wants him? They were the only team that wanted him a year ago, and they're just going to dump out of this. They gave up stuff for him too. They're just bailing on that. Like again at number 7, I would have taken Dillingham. I just would have found a way to find him in there rather than just draft another big. It's nothing against Clingan, and I actually think if he'd went somewhere else, Clingan might have had way more success. I think he's doomed in Portland. I would have taken Dillingham. I would have went with another guard. I know they're so committed to Simons, but at what point do we start winning? And Scoot was so whatever last year. It's like, well, maybe we take another swing at Dillingham. I think that we're at that stage and would have been safe. It would have actually justified trading for Ayton and trading for Rob last year if you take Dillingham now. Now none of it makes sense.
I mean, I could see having redundancy, having had Rob on the Celtics, and he is definitely a guy that's perennially injured. But to have 3 of them, that's too many. I just don't see a path forward.
All right, what do you got? Draft takeaway.
My last one is the ESPN broadcast just continues to struggle. Just some of it is like their own fault. Some of it, I don't necessarily have a solution for it, but we're still doing we know that there's a trade, but we're gonna have them wear the wrong hat because I guess this trade isn't all the way official, as well as we all know we're following along off the broadcast and we know a trade has happened. And then it'll be a half an hour later and Silver's about to make a pick and then told there's a trade. It's like, oh, trade. It's like, oh, you mean this trade that happened half an hour ago? Oh, yeah. And so some of it's like, okay, well, they're official. They got to wait till this stuff happens. But then there's part of this is that Woj is on the desk. He's on the desk doing this, and at the same time is still spoiling picks. He's like ruining his own product. It almost feels like if you're watching a movie and the main character like looks like directly at you and tells you what's going to happen in the next scene and just spoils it. Just like, wait, what are you doing here? I totally get Shams doing it. I get other people that are plugged in, and I get that this is his job. But for him to be doing it while he's on the show, I don't get it. I don't get it at all.
I didn't watch anything of it. I stayed online. I checked Twitter every so often. You were watching it. You wasted time doing it, and you were following it on Twitter, and you would have been better off just doing that. There's no point in watching the broadcast, let alone having 2 days of it.
I don't think that's true because you do get to see the guys. I'm more plugged in with my college basketball team, so it was cool seeing McCain get drafted, and so I wanted to listen to those interviews, and you see kind of more the human side of it. But yeah, most of the time I was on mute, and the next day for the second round, yeah, there was I had no interest in following along and on TV. It was way easier just to follow along on X.
I just don't know who's watching these at this point. I mean, if you're a diehard fan and you're actually caring and following this, you're on Twitter. I don't care. You can have it on. You can watch it, but you are watching it happen and knowing what actually happened on your phone.
But isn't that a problem?
Yes, it's a massive problem.
Figured that out.
I think it's a problem that people just watch it and do that. We should stop watching it to force them to make us watch it. There's no reason to watch it.
That's what I said. So yeah, ESPN broadcast continues to struggle.
All right, my last takeaway. OKC taking Nikola Topic from Serbia at number 12. Who's already out for the year and only dropped to 12 because he's got an ACL and might have incredible value. What are we waiting for though? Like what is this? Like we're still building? Like this is like hearing trust the process when it's like no, we need to win now. I'm not saying there was a guy there they could have gotten that immediately helped him this year, but I think we could have got a guy that was maybe capable of playing this year. Is that so crazy? Like am I taking crazy pills for saying this team that isn't like a win now mode, just saying we'll punt this pick? I know it's not top 10, it's 12, but we could have taken a guy that could play this year, and instead they're like, we're gonna basically trade Josh Giddey for Caruso, and then we're gonna draft another Josh Giddey who can't even play next year. I just what are we waiting for in OKC? Like let's do some win now moves. They signed Hartenstein, they stole him from the Knicks. I think that was a massive move. But what are we doing with this pick? Like why don't we just trade this pick back? I'd rather have another pick than do this.
For sure, Odd. Like you said, all things said, and like there had to have been some other, move. But I'm wondering if they really like the team that they had. They traded for Caruso, they got Hartenstein, and so they've already made the moves. And really, they said we can't. We're not going to be able to onboard another guy in a weak draft. So maybe it was good to say, hey, we're just going to stash this guy. We have our team. We loved it from last year. Number 1 seed in the West. Adding weapons for this upcoming year, and said we're just gonna stash him away.
It's just look, I'm not opposed to stash. I think it's good value of stash. I actually think he will be a good player. I just would have liked to see OKC say like, look what we did in the draft. We got this guy again because they've done very well in the past. I thought Casey Wallace was good. Like they've done good picks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying this
they've got a lot of them, and they got a lot more coming.
Yeah, I know. And maybe that's it. I don't know, but I just would have done something that possibly could have helped us this year rather than for sure taking something that's definitely doesn't help us this year. But next year it'd be great. And it's like, well, what about this year? Why are we preparing for next year's championship? How about we try and win this year? All right, we got to move on. There's more without the draft. There's NBA free agency. We have some really good signings. We got some questionable signings. And we got some bad signings, and those are our judgments. Why don't you do the honors? You want to start with the good, the bad, or the ugly?
Well, even beyond my favorites, the goods. I just want to throw out all the things that the Celtics are doing. We didn't sign any new free agents or anything like that, but we have re-signed all of our guys earlier today. Derek White locked up for I think it's the next 4 years, as well as right before we started recording this today, Jason Tatum got the Supermax, all as expected. But we are locked in with this team, all the guys. The only one I think we're losing, that actually was like kind of in the rotation was O'Shea Brissett. He opted out of his, but we got Luke back, all the guys. So those were obviously my all the way favorites, but those weren't really changing teams or anything like that. So my favorite was Clay. Clay going, it's going to be a sign and trade, but headed to the Dallas Mavericks. They were able to change Hardaway Jr. and Derek Jones Jr. into Najee Marshall and Klay Thompson, as well as to I think they got under the first apron, which means they will be able to make more moves going forward, where some of the other teams are trying to avoid that, or they're going to be kind of locking themselves in and could really hamstring them going down. But I think you look at what Klay did with the Warriors last year, and he's not prime Warriors Klay anymore. But Hardaway Jr., he wasn't playing most of the playoffs. Like, I brought it up in the finals saying, why is the guy that was the the third leading scorer on your team earlier in this year, like, just not even getting played? And so I think that Klay going in there, known right from the beginning, hey, you are the third guy. You're going to be the spot up guy. I think he can help space the floor, and I think that this is going to help this Dallas team.
I had Klay under the bad list. Not even the questionable, on the bad list.
Oh, man.
This is a terrible contract.
All the way down.
He's so done. I don't understand why they think if it didn't work in Golden State that somehow he's going to be able to make it work in Dallas. It's like they were giving him open shots over there. There's a point in the series. There's a point in the playoffs. There's a point in the last bit of the regular season where they were begging for Klay Thompson to shoot because he just wasn't making it. He kept trying to heat check every game, and he'd get it going a little bit there, but there's no way that this is going to benefit Dallas for him trying to heat check. They have other guys that are heat checks. And I think Hardaway is actually a really good comparison to this, and I think you're going to get a similar performance. The only thing is it's not going to have the name tag of Klay Thompson, NBA champion, and it's also not going to be 3 years and $50 million, which is what Klay's getting. And then sign and trade might be a smart deal and a good maneuver in the best way possible you could have acquired Klay. That's all very, very smart moves, and Dallas is somewhat handcuffed to the things that they're capable of, but I'm just so out on Klay. I'm out on a guy that isn't that good of a shooter that takes a lot of shots. Why would anyone want a guy like that on their team? And that's what he is at this point. He's not a good defender. He's what is he, a veteran leader on Luka and Kyrie here? What, he's going to come in and steer them straight? No, he's not going to do that. He has to come in and be Ray Allen off the bench, and he's not willing to do that. Until he's willing to come off the bench, bad contract.
He doesn't have to be one of the main guys. He could be the third guy, and I think that's gonna be way easier. And I think that look at the spots that he's gonna be playing in. He's gonna be taking that that corner three, and I think he's better than Derek Jones Jr. And I think that he can still play defense. I don't think he's gonna be at his prime anymore. But just looking at the stats, I mean he averaged 18 points last year on 39% shooting from three. I think you just have to look at it as compared to the other guys, not compared to Klay in 2015, which is that's never going to come back. But I think that what Dallas needs, I think he can be there and take care of that.
Well, he better be prepared to be that role because he seems to always want to run off screens and start the game off coming up down and then just launching. He's not going to be able to do that anymore. He's going to have to chill and move without the ball and not get the ball all the time and be cool with that. There was an expectation for Golden State over the last couple of years, and of him getting a certain amount of shots, him being a certain part of the offense, and Curry's more than willing to share that with anything. Like he's a very selfless player. I don't think Luke and Kyrie are nearly as selfless as Curry is. So I think he's gonna be a little rude awakening, and maybe a change of scenery is just what he needed. But based on what I've seen over the last couple of years, maybe the extra year of recovery off an injury right here, he'll actually bounce back a little bit more. But I I'm out on Clay. I didn't want anything to do with him. I was hoping the Lakers were going to get him. I was hoping he didn't go to Dallas because I liked what Dallas did last year, and I think this is the move that the Knicks normally make every year, and we always made fun of them. And this is a desperation of having a name for old success. Of why wasn't he successful this past couple years on Gold State? Like why? It's because of him. He had a lot to do with it.
I think it had a lot to do that they have an absolute maniac on their team, and they didn't trade him.
I still think Clay still misses a lot of shots, just like Draymond misses games.
That'll be interesting. That'll be an interesting study to see how that lines up.
All right, my favorite signing. I can't believe you had Clay as your favorite. Not even questionable. I mean, borderline questionable. He's at the back end of his years. My favorite signing was OKC taking Isaiah Hartenstein. I mentioned a little bit of that earlier. For one, as a Celtics fan, I just love that this really hurts the Knicks. I also think that this is the one weakness that I was giving OKC last year of not having just a body out there, just a guy willing to rebound. And I love Chet. I love the versatility of this team. But this is almost kind of like what the Knicks are now. They're desperately missing a backup that's willing to go out there and grab rebounds, not look for a whole lot of shots, and just be an awesome teammate. It may be a little bit pricey, but I think similar to giving everything up for Mikal Bridges, you do it because it's a really good fit. I think this is going to be a really good fit for OKC. He can resume the role he was playing for the Knicks. I'm sure he could start some games with some injuries. And I don't see this backfiring. I think this is a really good big. I almost give them credit for being patient enough and actually getting this guy, not just getting anyone. But I think last year they would have been better off with just anyone, but this certainly pans out really well for them. And I'd say it's easily my favorite signing so far of the offseason. Was this on any of your list? Was it on your bad list? Did we do that?
No, this wasn't. This barely moved the needle for me.
Barely moved the needle?
I think OKC does need a rebounder, but if you're gonna have Hartenstein out there, it means you're taking away somebody else's minutes. And I mean, you said a lot of. You mentioned a lot of things that are, intangibles. Oh, he's going to be a good teammate. He's going to be a, big body out there. It's just like, well,
he's going to be a bench player. He's going to play 20 minutes a game. I think that's a hard. And then you know what? He's going to help against Jokic. He's going to help against Embiid. He's going to help against Giannis. He's going to help against all these other massive people. And it's just something that they have as a weapon that they didn't have before. It doesn't have to be used every night. And it probably won't be used every night. And the formula that they had last year can still work. It's just there's certain times where I feel like they had a massive vulnerability at big that they just have now as a new tool in the tool belt. That's all it is. I'm not saying this moves the needles. I'm with you. This isn't like some massive move, but it's like, oh, look what they can do now. At least they can do that. They couldn't do that before.
I mean, this guy has been on different teams almost every year of his career, and just I think he can help around the edges, but as your favorite free agent signing, it just, I don't know, it seems more of like all right, no, that's like a smart move that OKC made, and can help their team, but I don't know, there's no wow factor there for me.
To be fair, I only had two favorite signings. Everything else I really didn't like. There's not a lot to like.
Okay.
There's not a lot to like. I wrote down like 15 of these, and there's only 3 I wrote down that I liked, and one of them I don't really even count. I thought the Spurs getting Chris Paul for 1 year, $12 million is just like a good deal, but it's not. It's not good. It's just a good deal.
That's my second favorite.
All right. We see. Well, yeah, it's Mr. Economics over here. It sounds.
You were bashing him before, but I didn't want to step on this top or on this game they're playing here. Chris Paul is my second favorite because the Spurs last year are throwing out Jeremy Sohan and trying to have him figure it out, and he's not really a point guard. They're trying to make him a point forward, and you just need someone to run the offense. Get the ball to Wembanyama, make sure he's super successful so he can reach that next level, and Chris Paul can do all of that. He lived through Lob City. He's not at that same level, but I think he's gonna be able to just put Wemby in the right direction, and I think that he's not just ring chasing. You had mentioned that teams weren't really interested in him in the past few years. I would counter that saying they weren't interested in paying him $30+ million. $12 million. All right, cool. Well, we got a bunch of young guys. We got to pay somebody anyway. The $12 million, that's much more palatable. And I think that he Even if he's not playing, even if he gets hurt like he has in the past few years, I think that he could still help the team out. And you even mentioned saying you prefer him in a suit on the sideline. I think one better is to have him actually be suited up and be playing, and he could still do all the intangibles that you want on him helping out the young guys.
Yeah. All right. Well, my actual other favorite free agent signing, and it's more out of a desperation of what Philly did. And you're going to think it's Paul George, but it's actually Kelly Oubre. No, I have both of them written down, but it's I like that Philly had a whole bunch of cap space. They had to spend it on someone. I don't think these are the worst guys to do it. As a Boston fan, am I suddenly more scared of Philadelphia? Nah, not so much. Is this probably the best, 2 players that Embiid's ever had between Paul George and Maxey? Yeah, I think so. I think that's better than whatever Harden Maxey was and whatever Simmons and whoever and Fultz and whatever. But I think this is the best they could have done. I thought it was an opportunity. I almost give the Clippers credit for kind of standing up strong for this. I don't know how they were able to just swallow the pill of what they gave up to get Paul George and then to just say, nah, we're going to let him walk. It's like, man, I can't believe they just stonewalled like that. But for Philly, you have 2 guys on your roster coming into this, so you have to sign someone, and I think this is a positive signing for them, even if it doesn't guarantee a championship. It's at least a Morey does it again, drags another player. Somehow Philly ends up being in terrible situations and finds ways to almost get out of them, and it at least gives them a chance. And that's one thing I'll give Morey credit for is somehow he finds a way to make everything seem like, well, at least we have a chance because we didn't have a chance with that before. And I give him credit for that. So that was my only other signing I actually kind of liked were the 2 Philly signings.
I can't be mad about Oubre, who can be a decent, solid role player for $8 million a year. I mean, that's you're not seeing those kind of numbers very much anymore. That low. So if you can lock that in for 2 years, I think that helps.
I think it's easily a piece.
I had Paul George as a questionable. He's 34, but I think the Sixers are in a spot, and Morey likes to do this. Of you need stars, and so now they have a big 3, and I think this could tail off in a hurry. But they got cap space. They got a former All-Star, and I think he also fits in where they have Maxey, they have Embiid, so you got a guard. You got the big man. Now you have the wing to go along with it. Big forward, and so they each are going to be in their role, and it should work. It's still going to take a bunch to fill in all the rest of the spots around it. I know they got Drummond, so we'll see. We'll see, but I think they had to make the move. Not great for the Clippers. Not great for the Clippers. We kind of talked about that earlier.
I think Paul George is a little bit more complimentary of a superstar than you're going to sign, and I mean that he doesn't have the Tobias Harris things of disappearing, but there are moments where plays don't need to be drawn up for him, and suddenly he'll hit a corner 3 and be like, "Oh, that was great. Can he do that more often?" And then he'll take over games, and I think he may be the best end-of-game guy they've had in a while. I mean, it depends on what you think about what Embiid does at the end of the game and what Harden does at the end of the game. I wouldn't say he's like significantly better, but I do think at least they have 3 different guys that are 3 different positions that can kind of all get their own shot off, and hopefully that's successful for Philly and is a chance worth taking. All right, other questionable contracts. What you had Paul George is questionable, and you had
Yep. And my next one is also Clippers related. It's going to be James Harden, 2 years, $70 million. I think that the Clippers are in a spot now that they've lost Paul George, as well as will Kawhi play next year? And everybody shrugs their shoulders and goes, maybe? They're opening a new arena next year. They need a name. James Harden is a name. Everybody knows James Harden, former MVP, and it might turn out that he is the guy that has to shoulder this load. I don't think that's great for actually winning games, but to put people on that wall and make sure that they show up early and stand in line to be a part of it, you need somebody. You need somebody to get you in the door, and it better be 1 or 2 guys on your team. Otherwise, no one's going to be in that wall. It's going to be empty because that is supposed to be only for Clipper fans and not opposing fans. So it's probably an overpay, but I think they had to do it.
yeah, I think questionable is fair to put it. and it's only questionable because of the situation they put themselves in, which is bad to begin with, and it's like two bads don't make a right, and I don't know. You can't take nothing. My questionable ones was both of the Toronto signings with Emmanuel Quickly, 5 years, 175. Scotty Barnes, 5 years, was it 270? Just
It was the max.
this team wasn't good last year, right? Like they keep Bruce Brown. They're just spending money, and this is all after. Well, we didn't want to pay DeMar DeRozan, and then DeMar kind of went off and had like 2, 3, whatever really good years in Chicago. Didn't turn out to be super successful, but it wasn't because of him. And then Fred VanVleet leaves because they don't want to pay him, and they don't trade him either. They like play this ball game of being like, "Oh, you want to stay, right?" He's like, "No, I want to get paid," and then he just leaves for nothing. So I'm not sure if this is a haunting thing of letting guys go and not holding on to them, and then making trades for. They didn't want to trade OG Anunoby, who got paid 5 years, 212. Like, I don't know if that's something they wanted to do either, but maybe I would have rather paid OG over Emmanuel Quickly and Scotty Barnes. Would you? I just think all of this is very questionable. What are they committed to? They're committed to a team that wasn't that good last year, and they're just locking it down. Like, that seems crazy to me. For years, for max years. What do you like about this? Is there anything to like?
I think they got backed into a corner, and I think when you have you have the young guys, sometimes you just get forced. And it's like, would you like them to be a little bit better? Sure, but if you don't give them the max, then they're gonna leave for nothing. I think part of it was they just made that deal to get Quickly, so you feel all right. Well, we traded for him, like we want to keep him, and that's how. But that's not a good way to run an organization.
I had a Knicks fan call me.
I don't see Toronto really being any better this year.
I had a Knicks fan call me, and he was like, "Man, we gave up a lot for Bridges, and then like later we signed OG to like this massive contract." And then he was like, "But I looked at the Quickly contract and was like, well, I think I'd rather have OG like easily for that money than what I like just paying Quickly that like that. I don't know. I don't have anything against him, and I'm not saying that he won't grow in and make the contract worth it. There's this weird thing when you're not good, you want to have certain flexibility and you got to pay certain guys, and I just don't know if these were the guys. And I know that's what you have, but I don't know. I think it's very questionable. I wish them the best, but this could easily be some of the worst contracts going forward. Speaking of some of the worst contracts, what do you got for the bad contracts?
For the bad one, my first one, Tobias Harris, Detroit, 2 years, $52 million. This has got to be great for Tobias. He came in, got absolutely paid to play for the Sixers, didn't really do so well, had to deal with the Sixers media and playoffs. Now he can go and play with the young guys and still get paid a bunch of money. I don't know why the Pistons decided, hey, this is the guy we're going to throw money at. Maybe that was the only option. But if you're trying to figure out, hey, which of these guys going forward is, better, I thought they just re-signed Cade and trying to kind of build around him, and they just are getting guys that are not really going to help the spacing, as well as Tobias isn't going to be part of the regime when this is actually successful. But I think they might have just said, like, with the cap where you have to spend 90% of it, I think at some point they said, well, someone's getting paid money, let's make it this guy. But I think besides Tobias Harris making money on this and just getting paid to play much more casual basketball, I think it's bad for everybody else.
Who else would offer Tobias this? Like, is any other team even remotely close to this? Because I think that's part of it being a bad contract, is that no one else would have gave him this.
I can't think of anybody.
Yeah, outside.
It's got to be much lower, because I still think that he can contribute to a playoff team, but he's not a max guy on a playoff team. He's not the main guy on a playoff team. He's more almost like you're talking about with Oubre, of like, hey, if you can get him for $10 million a year, something in that neighborhood, and just he's down the line of guys getting shots, but 26.
I had him written down as one of my bad contracts. I have too many bad contracts. I had Clay written down, I had Tobias written down, but my number one bad one that I didn't like, and it's not even that I don't have hope for the player. I haven't seen it. It's Obi Toppin's in Indiana, 4 years, $60 million. What do we like about this? Like, what is there upside? Are you seeing improvement? Is there some hope of this guy actually being what? Like, I just don't see it. I see the through the legs thing, and that's cool. But what are we hoping for here? Is he going to learn to shoot? Is he going to be a better defender? Like, what? Why are we guaranteeing this guy long term when I don't know what he is at this point?
I think he's a young guy. I think his shooting can improve. He's definitely bouncy. We kind of made the joke, but that's always my joke. He dunked between his legs during a game, and at 15, I think 15 is reasonable for a young guy. It's Indiana. They're not going to have star guys just walking through. So if you got a guy and you can retain him, I think you have to.
I just think for all the years of being unhappy with Miles Turner and then kind of being like, we never want to trade him though, and then they do the Halliburton Sabonis thing, and they were like, well, we don't know if Sabonis could play with this, but we'll bring in Toppins because he could play with who? I'm not sure. I like the Siakam deal. I thought that was a good deal making the trade last year. I thought he was good in the playoffs. I'm happy they were able to re-sign him to justify the trade. I don't know where he fits in with all of this, and it just seems like they didn't know what to do and they had to do something. And I don't think those are where the good contracts come from, where you just have to do something. So that goes on the bad list for me. I have a couple other contracts. I don't know where you had them on the list, but I just feel like we kind of got to talk about them a little bit. I had the Caldwell Pope to Orlando for 3 years, 66 as a questionable one. I think it's a good move for Orlando. I just want to maybe talk more about what this does to Denver. I think this is it. Like, I think this just crossed Denver off of, like, potential. I think they are assuming they're just going to be able to fill someone in who can take the Caldwell Pope shots, but maybe not make them. And that changes this offense entirely. I think you're going to be able to focus on all these guys that are main threats or playmakers in Murray and Jokic, but they don't have anyone else to worry about. Gordon isn't a good shooter on the outside. We already saw him getting left alone. And hoping that Christian Brown is just going to come in and shoot all these shots. They're not going to be running out there like it was Caldwell Pope shooting it, and I think that really changes the spacing on this. That being said, Orlando is such a funny team that I know they need more shooting, but with him adding more shooting, it's also removing someone, and I don't know who you remove, and it's kind of like a weird lineup that's either massive or you don't play all these guys together. So I see a scenario where they're paying for this guy, and he just might not be in the rotation every night. Or maybe not, finishing games. And that's where I think it's questionable. Where would you have had him on the list?
I think it has much more to do with what Denver is losing more than what the Magic are gaining. I think the Magic are still a very young team, so they're just cost controlled, so they can afford to splurge on a guy like this where a lot of other teams wouldn't be able to. But yeah, I think this just goes more to Denver, where every year now it seems like they don't lose one of the main guys, but they're losing a rotation guy. And just is Christian Braun, like, is he ready to make the step up? Maybe. I think what this really shows is, the margin is super tiny, might not even exist anymore, and you cannot have no-show Michael Porter Jr. games. It can't happen. It can't happen, and I think it was just this playoffs. It was just, well, at some point he's gonna turn it around. It was just a little bit of a funk. It's gonna figure itself out, and it didn't, and they got knocked out. And it can't happen if they want to have success.
I'm looking back at the last couple of years of Denver. It was like, well, we don't want to give Jeremy Grant the max. Let him go. And it's like, all right, fine, he's gone. They win a championship. Bruce Brown next year was like, all right, we literally can't. Like, there's just no way we could do it. Like, we have to let him go. We let him go. This year with Caldwell Pope, there really is an excuse. They could have given him this. They could have matched it. They just chose not to. And I just didn't really see the scenario where they were like, oh, man, I really regret giving Caldwell Pope this. It's like, I think you really regret giving Michael Porter Jr. that money, and that this isn't because of that. Like, I feel like they're recovering from the mistake of that, and now it's punishing Caldwell Pope, but it's punishing the whole team as a whole. It seems silly, and I really think this is a huge hit to Denver. And I really am looking at them differently as a threat in the West now. All right, last, we got to close it real quick with this. This is a big trade. The Pelicans made a trade for DeJounte Murray from Atlanta. They're getting Larry Nance back, 2 first-round picks, and Dyson Daniels. There was a market for Trae Young. There was a market for DeJounte Murray. It seemed like they had to make a move with having the number 1 pick in Atlanta. I'm not sure what this does for Atlanta at all. other than just like that it's over of that era. That was a failed attempt, and that they're just starting all over again. But for the Pelicans, I think this is a great move. I think this is another ball handler, kind of a good scorer that they need, and I think this is a good fit. Is this going to be the final nail in the coffin for your Ingram friend from Duke over there? Like, what do you do? What is this doing for the Pelicans?
Well, I was hearing that there was some interest from other teams in trading for Ingram. I think even if he stays, I don't think this is he's done. I still think he's still an excellent player. It's just about figuring out how this team's going to work. And they really didn't give up that much, player wise. A couple of Lakers pick, Bucks pick, and just for a guy that can really play, and just maybe this is like the mix up that you need, and just to make this work, where you have a guard, you have a guard that can score, along with Zion, along with Ingram, and I think it was worthwhile to make this swing.
I think it puts a lot less pressure on CJ McCollum, and that's kind of what I thought this team needed. It's just another ball handler that they don't have to be incredibly reliant on, and this is one that they can be, and that's a good fit. I'm not exactly saying they should immediately get rid of Ingram. I think I've seen that enough, and if this immediately comes in and it's like Zion and Murray play a little bit better together, I would just go with that, because there hasn't been a lot of examples of Ingram and Zion playing well together, and I think if you're Ingram, there's a scenario where I think you could play well on another team too, and if you're Zion, I think it's maybe time to just see what it looks like with my team a little bit more, and I think it's a step closer to that. So I think it's a good move for them. If you're Atlanta, we're just a mess now, right? Like there's just so much to sort through that how could you be excited or disappointed by anything at this point? We're in a reset mode, aren't we? Like they're not competing this year.
I mean, big time reset, and it just like it seems like at this point you got the number one pick. You're getting some picks coming in the next couple of years. It's like, get rid of Trey. Like, get rid of him and you start over.
I think when the Spurs signed CP3, it was like, oh, so there's not a market for Trey? Who would have saw that coming? All right, lastly, as we're getting out of here real quick, we got 2 minutes before we're out. The Boston Celtics are rumored to be for sale, whereas the Wick and his whatever investment group saying that they could potentially be on the market soon. I think this will be the biggest sale. No,
I said not a rumor. The news came out, and then it's been officially announced by the Celtics. This is happening.
I'm terrified. I like things the way they are. I think it's weird when billionaires want to sell the team for money, or they just don't want to do it anymore. It seems like this is a toy. I guess if you're not going to take it seriously, it's probably responsible to sell it. You can't all the money in the world. You can't buy another team, or I guess you can, but like you're already at the point where you have all the money in the world and you did buy the team, and there's nothing else you could do with it. Like this is, I would keep it. I wouldn't sell it. This is a franchise I think that's going to sell for the highest sports team ever. I think that's the evaluation we're going to get out of this, and hopefully we don't get an owner that we're disappointed on. I mean, is there any rumor of someone you would want? Like, is there some wild celebrity group you want? Like, what's the A-Rod equivalent for Boston?
I think at this point, these teams are too expensive. It's not one person. You're not going to get just anything you think like Ballmer. It's like that was at the peak. Like it's just not going to be one guy. It's going to be a group of someone's. I don't know who would be more preferable than other people. So I don't know if that helps out with that kind of new owner syndrome. If there's a whole collection of people. I mean, I can see from Wick's point of view, you bought this team over 20 years ago for a little over $300 million, and now last time this was evaluated was looking at $4 billion. So a 10x on your return. I agree with you that it's not always about the money. It's about, hey, you have this piece as well. But if you were looking to sell the team at any time in the future, I mean, this is the top of the market. I mentioned earlier, we just won a championship, and all the guys are locked in for the foreseeable future. So if you buy this team, you're getting a contender right now, like ready to go. The only reason I can think that they're doing this is both to sell at the peak of the market, as well as I was looking at some numbers, and with Tatum signing that supermax, I think it's in 2 years, we'll be looking at something like $125 million just for the luxury tax. That's not the salary and the luxury tax. That's just the luxury tax component of it. So I don't know if there's financial reasons that go into this, as well as I had seen them mention that they're doing this to help with estate planning. So I don't know if I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it definitely makes me nervous.
It could be anybody. I'm hoping it won't just be anyone, but I just don't want to have a cheap owner. I guess that's really the worst case scenario. I don't want it to be anything like. Can we have Kraft sell the Patriots too? Because I'm ready to jump on that bandwagon. Let's just put that up for sale. Anyone want both of them? We just nominate someone.
No one's that rich. That's like the GDP of like large countries.
That's what it should be. All right, thanks for everyone for listening. Little Column A, Little Column B. Subscribe on Spotify. You can follow Zach on his Twitter account, which is
Wicked Z-Man 24.
We'll be back next week with hopefully not our new Celtics owner, but maybe he'll change his mind. It'll be like the Minnesota guy. It's like I'm selling it, and then he's like, nah, I'm good. I'm out. I still want it. We'll be back.
Well, little column A, little column B.